Jackie Doyle-Price.
Mr Deputy Speaker, and it is with great pleasure that I add my voice in support of my Right Honourable Friend's bill, and I congratulate him for bringing forward what is actually quite a radical measure, really. I mean, there's an outbreaking of consensus across this House, but when we reflect that these issues have been causing a nuisance and misery for women for generations, and we've had women representatives in this place for over 100 years, isn't it amazing that it's taken us this long to actually bring forward a measure which, as the Honourable Lady, the Member for Walthamstow said, will be liberating? Because we have all had, as women, our freedoms compromised by having to tolerate behaviour which really should have been ruled as unacceptable a long, long time ago. And I listened very carefully to my Right Honourable Friend, and I thought the way with which he presented his bill, it was so articulate and so factual that it made it absolutely unarguable. And what a contrast, because I think it was only earlier this year that I heard a Prime Minister say from this dispatch box that we really shouldn't criminalise this because it caused too much work for the police. I mean, that statement on its own just tells you that women remain second-class citizens before the law of this country, because women are not the problem here. Women are the victims. The problem is the behaviour, and it is the behaviour that absolutely must be tackled. It's also great to follow three great champions of women in this place. I think we've wheeled out the star turn today, in no small part down to my Right Honourable Friend who very helpfully reminded us that his bill was coming forward today. But it's great to see them here. And I want to pay particular tribute to my Right Honourable Friend, the Member for Romsey, who has frankly been dogged in her pursuit of ministers on this issue. And as she points out, it was only in 2019 that she was vilified for making a public claim on this. And in that very short space of time, we've seen this debate transformed. So I'm feeling this is a good day for women in Parliament today. And I'm pleased to hear the Minister say that the government will support this measure. I am, however, slightly concerned by what she said about establishing intent, because the truth is that these behaviours that this bill is designed to tackle should be unacceptable in any context. And if I make an analogy, when the Mayor of London reduced the speed limit on the embankment to 20 miles an hour, I got 2 speeding tickets because I didn't know. So I didn't intend to break the law, because but I committed an offence, because the very fact that that law had been, the speed limit had been changed, meant I was in breach of the law. I had no real ability to defend myself on that, because the behaviour was wrong. And I think that's exactly the standard that should be brought to bear here, particularly when you think that some of these crimes will be committed by groups of men in gangs, or acting clever, cajoling each other, egging each other on. Somebody may feel that they can arguably say, well, it wasn't a problem, I didn't intend to cause offence, we were just having a bit of fun. That can't be acceptable. There can be no question of allowing any kind of loophole. Now, we've heard repeatedly in this House that women have to take decisions every day of the week about their safety. And I think, as my right friend, the Member for Romsey, has outlined, and we really need to sort of bring these to life to make the whole House realise what we're talking about. When she talks about wearing a trainers to walk home, this is the kind of thing we do. And I'm sure I'm not alone in putting my hood up to make sure that no one can see it. And even now, as a woman in her 50s, I am still making these decisions. These are not things that just affect young women. But I want to speak specifically about young women this morning, because some of the experiences that young women have during their teens, as they start to become noticed for being women, those can cause real harm. Young girls can be traumatised by the attention that they attract from men. And, I've said before in this place, for young women going through puberty and going through changes in their body that they're not comfortable with, to have overlaid onto that unwelcome male attention can be very traumatising. And I'm going to just relay a conversation I had recently on a school visit. And, you know, all of us go into schools, don't we? And we talk about being members of Parliament. Sometimes the visits are really good. Sometimes they're quite hard work. And it takes a while to get them going and asking questions. And it was actually for International Women's Day. And I went to speak to a group of girls who were all sort of 13, 14 years old, and it was hard work. they weren't being very, they weren't being very forward. And then I just chucked in. So, how many of you in this room have been victims of street harassment? Now, you know, I'm not naive about this sort of stuff, but even I was shocked because every single one of them had a story. And there was one particular girl, bless her. Actually, she was quite inspirational. She was 14 years old. She could have passed for much older, in truth. But she told this story about how she'd basically been followed, and she was starting to feel this man was coming up quite close. He kept making suggestive comments to her. And bless that girl, at 14 years old, she deliberately walked to where there were a lot of people in the shopping centre, and she turned round and she hollered at him. And I suspect that wasn't the first time he'd done that to any girl. I also suspect he'd think twice about doing it again after she did that. And again, for a 14-year-old girl, though, to be doing that is just... If we're expecting our teenage girls to have that degree of courage, that degree of bravado, that degree of strength, I think we're expecting an awful lot of them, when the reality is what should be tackled is that aggressive, entitled behaviour. Because what that man was doing was basically saying, you know, my entitlement to get enjoyment from ogling you young girl trumps your ability to say no. And the fact is, we've allowed our laws to continue to absolutely, you know, embed that principle in all aspects of our law. This bill will help to change that. The other aspect of that particular visit was there was a male teacher in the room, and the beauty of it was that as each one of these girls shared their experiences, you could see the revelation with him. And at the end of the meeting, he actually spoke quite emotionally to the girls and basically said, look, you know, we need to do something about this in school. We need to start telling the boys how you feel when they behave like this. So I thought, well, that's great. I've done a good day's work here off our toodles. And then a few weeks ago, I was actually attending a church service, and this girl came up to me. She grabbed hold of my arm and she said, I just wanted to thank you. She said, because I was in that room when you came to school, and she said, and I've now become the head girl, and we've got a project running all the way through the school, and we're all talking about it. And I thought, fantastic. Fantastic. But this is the lived experience of teenage girls up and down this country. You know, there's lots of criticism of the fact that, you know, too many cars outside schools, and, you know, we've got to get people onto public transport. But, you know, for girls travelling by public transport, it's like a war zone. Probably isn't. We talk about there's not a single woman in this house who hasn't experienced this stuff. Public transport system is probably one of the worst places to be in it. So if we think about moving policies towards achieving net zero, we do need to think about some of the implications of these things. And it's why things like this bill are so important, to make everybody safe. So I'm pleased to see that the opinion is changing, and changing very rapidly. And I think one of the reasons for that is that the terrible incident of Wayne Couzens and the dreadful crimes he perpetrated did actually force everybody to stop in their tracks and perhaps tell all the men in this house that it could happen to anyone. These aren't crimes that just are directed at people that, you know, in more deprived communities, or, you know, lower income groups, or, you know, people who've been through the cases, it can happen to everyone. It does happen to everyone. And I can remember speaking to a ministerial colleague who told me that he'd gone home and expressed his shock at what happened, only to have the revelation from his wife and his sister that this was our lived experience all of the time. And another colleague, after I'd been on one of my regular diatribes on this subject, told me that now when he gets into the lift here and he's with a woman, he feels really uncomfortable in case he's intimidating her. And I thought, good, we're achieving something. When men start to think about how their behaviour affects women, we're doing something right. So I make no apology for making him feel uncomfortable. The truth is, society has looked the other way for too long about this. We have seen these behaviours normalised, and women have been expected to just suck it up. And we have, and you'll still find some women who think it's just bantz. Well, it's not bantz, it can do harm. As I've said, this is about power. This is about men using their collective accepted powers to reassert their power over women. And it comes as something of a shock that, for all our messages of equality and all our let's get more women into Parliament, let's have more equality of opportunity, there are still these low-level behaviours that some men use to intimidate women. And they would use powers to intimidate other people as well, but women are perhaps the softest target with which to make inadequate men feel superior. And it just isn't okay. It just isn't okay to do that. Lewd catcalling, which is some of the behaviours that we're talking about here, can also make women feel very uncomfortable about their bodies. And I return to the issue of teenage girls and how uncomfortable it can be for them. It is with no surprise for me to see so many teenage girls exploring new gender identities at the moment, because the attention that they're receiving from men can be so unwelcome. And if I think back to my time when I was a teenager, we didn't have the amount of porn one click away from on the screen of a phone that we do now. I mean, in those days, porn was much more restricted. So those kind of images, highly sexual images of women and women's bodies, were not as freely available. The truth is that boys will have seen the kind of stuff that used to be on the top shelf of a newspaper before they reach their teens. And it's without any surprise, therefore, that the sexualised view of girls starts to materialise much quicker. And this is the case, as my right honourable friend, the member for Romsey, has just outlined. So much of that sexually aggressive behaviour that girls experience often starts in schools. So again, there's a broader behavioural pattern here. And I think probably one of the most important things about this bill is that it will send a message to society that this behaviour is not okay, it is wrong, it is harmful. So the idea that we should worry about the volume of work that the police will have to do as a consequence of this bill, that's not the issue here. It is about sending out that message that this is not behaviour that we are prepared to tolerate anymore. I'd also like to just underline the point that the Honourable Lady, the member for Walthamstow, raised when she talked about how this will change the culture of how women view the police in this area. Because the crimes that will escalate in being reported, as she says, are things like rape, are things like domestic violence. Because what it will send out is actually that the criminal justice system is on the side of women. Right now, culturally, we're having to put up with things which are causing us harm but are trivialised by the law. So that automatically doesn't put us in a good position, in a good relationship, to have respect for the institutions of the law. And the fact that the police will have to take a record of these will mean that they take the whole issue of gendered crime more seriously. So I would like to see, and I'm quite confident that we will see, as a consequence of implementing a measure like this, that we will see much more willingness on the part of victims and on the part of law enforcement to go after these serious crimes. I look forward to the rape conviction rate being higher than it is. It's something we all share that objective, but we've never really examined culturally about the wider aspects of law as it affects women is getting in the way of that cultural behaviour. It's also the reason why so many incidents of domestic violence go unpunished. But it's a long time since women were treated as the property of their husbands and fathers-in-law. But behaviourally, those issues still have left a legacy, which means that women aren't treated fairly within the criminal justice system when it comes to getting justice for themselves. So, to summarise, I am hugely supportive of this bill. I am really grateful to my right honourable friend for bringing it forward. I'm pleased the government is supporting it, but I do think we need to be much more challenging in terms of wider issues around the law and the behaviour of all our institutions to make sure that when we do tackle violence against women and girls, and the fact we call it violence against women and girls rather than male violence against women and girls, again, is sort of epitomised as a problem we've got. We've always made it the victim's problem. It's been a women's problem. Well, it's not. The perpetrators are the problem. The perpetrators are men, and we should send a very, very strong signal that some behaviours are not going to be tolerated and that we will do all we can to protect women and girls going forward.